Imagine this. You're a man used to being the center of her emotional gravity. Her laughter followed your voice. Her softness absorbed your moods. Her world revolved quietly around the orbit of your validation. You believed that her warmth was endless, that her presence would always return like the tide. But one day, she stopped explaining. She stopped reaching out. The calls grew fewer, the messages slower, and her once radiant energy folded inward, like a sea retreating before a storm. Her stillness became the air you couldn't breathe. You didn't know it then, but her silence was not an ending, it was your reckoning. To the unaware man, a woman's stillness is confusing. It doesn't fit into his narrative of control. He is accustomed to reaction, anger, tears, pleas for understanding, because reaction means power. But stillness is something else. It's the collapse of the illusion that he was the source of her peace. When she grows quiet, it's not because she no longer feels. It's because she's finally seeing. The mask has fallen. She's no longer caught in the trance of trying to prove her worth through his chaos. Her silence is not weakness, it's evolution. Carl Jung once wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that's precisely what her stillness becomes, a mirror. For the man who thrived on her emotional labor, her silence exposes the hollow echo of his own avoidance. He begins to hear the noise within, the unhealed wounds, the childhood insecurities, the need to dominate, to be needed, to be worshipped. Without her energy to distract him from himself, he starts to feel the weight of his own emptiness. What he calls punishment is, in truth, reflection. Her stillness forces him to face the parts of himself he has long denied. For the woman, silence is sacred ground. It's not merely the absence of speech, but the presence of awareness. She has learned through suffering that not every emotion deserves expression, and not every storm deserves her shelter. The stillness she embodies is the art of self-preservation, the quiet power of choosing peace over performance. Her energy no longer exists to soothe someone else's instability. Instead, it returns home to her body, her breath, her being. She has learned the discipline of detachment, not as apathy, but as wisdom. You see, a man often mistakes her stillness for indifference. But indifference has no depth. Stillness, on the other hand, has infinite depth. It's not that she no longer feels, she feels everything. But she has mastered the art of not reacting to everything. She no longer tries to prove her love through explanation or validation. She's reached a level of emotional alchemy where she can transform pain into understanding, chaos into calm, loss into liberation. And while she stands in that quiet, he begins to unravel. His ego, once inflated by her attention, starts to deflate under the weight of her absence. He becomes restless, replaying old conversations, trying to decode the silence. He tells himself she's cold, heartless, detached, but deep down he knows the truth. She is free. Her stillness terrifies him because it represents a kind of power he cannot control, the power of self-containment. From a Jungian lens, what unfolds between them is the eternal dance between the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine within every psyche. Her withdrawal forces him to confront his own neglected inner feminine, the emotional sensitivity and vulnerability he has repressed. For her, the stillness is the integration of her inner masculine, the boundaries, logic, and strength she once outsourced to him. This is individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. When she stops chasing, she begins to create. When she stops speaking, she starts hearing her intuition again. What he perceives as silence is, in fact, her dialogue with the divine. The space between her words becomes a temple where she communes with clarity. She begins to remember who she was before she became who he wanted her to be. This remembrance is her rebirth, slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. He doesn't yet understand that her stillness isn't meant to punish him, it's meant to protect her. It's the natural consequence of imbalance, the rebalancing of energies that were once poured out carelessly. And yet, it feels like punishment because his validation depended on her emotional reaction. Without it, he loses his reflection, his identity, his false sense of power. He begins to chase shadows of her, in memories, in other women, in fantasies, trying to replicate the emotional intoxication she once provided. But what he misses most is not her body, nor her voice, but the safety of her acceptance, the way her presence allowed him to escape himself. Her stillness denies him that escape. It demands that he evolve, that he meet himself where he never dared to look. Some men do. They take the silence as an invitation to grow. Others run from it, seeking noise elsewhere. But none forget it. Because a woman's stillness, once known, becomes unforgettable, not for its emptiness, but for its depth. Her stillness lingers like a shadow in his mind, haunting him not with memories of her words, but with the sound of their absence. He can't stop replaying it, the way she used to respond with warmth, the way her eyes once carried softness even in disagreement. Now, those eyes are distant, tranquil, untouchable. He feels the gravity shift. For the first time, he senses that she no longer needs him, and it unsettles something primal in him. Men often mistake emotional independence for rejection, because they were never taught how to coexist with feminine strength that doesn't revolve around them. Her silence becomes a mirror he cannot bear to look into, because it shows him the part of himself that was never whole. In that quiet space, the psychological battle begins, not between them, but within him. The masculine ego, conditioned to seek control, interprets her calm as defiance. He may call her cold or distant, not realizing that what he feels is withdrawal from the very energy that once kept him afloat. The woman who once healed his wounds with affection now refuses to carry them any longer. She is no longer the nurse of his insecurities, nor the audience to his half-evolved masculinity. She has become sovereign, and sovereignty terrifies those who thrive on dependency. From a Jungian perspective, this is where his confrontation with the shadow begins. The shadow is everything he refuses to see about himself, the parts buried under pride, anger, and projection. Her stillness pulls those shadows to the surface. Without her emotional engagement to distract him, he begins to feel the emptiness behind his control. He's forced to confront the illusions of power he built from her devotion. Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Her silence, therefore, is not punishment, it's initiation. It's the soul's way of forcing him into the underworld of his own psyche. And for her, the stillness is not passive waiting. It is movement, inward, subtle, sacred. She is reclaiming every piece of herself that she scattered in the name of love. Her emotions, once weapons against herself, become instruments of awareness. She begins to observe instead of absorb. She listens not to please, but to understand. In that deep feminine quiet, she births herself anew. Stillness is her cocoon, not her cage. You can almost feel the transformation in her presence. She speaks less, but when she does, her words carry the weight of self-knowledge. Her eyes no longer plead, they pierce. Her aura feels different, not softer, but cleaner. She has detached not from love itself, but from the illusion that love must be earned through suffering. This is the alchemy of the awakened feminine, turning pain into clarity, longing into discernment, attachment into freedom. He senses it, though he can't articulate it. Something in him recognizes the shift, the subtle energetic boundary she has drawn. He tries to test it, perhaps through charm or guilt, but her energy no longer bends. She is not angry. That's what confuses him most. Anger he could fight. Indifference he could provoke. But stillness? Stillness leaves him powerless. He cannot touch it, cannot argue with it, cannot manipulate it. Her calm dismantles his defenses because it operates on a frequency he cannot control, the frequency of inner peace. Her stillness teaches him, perhaps for the first time, that love without respect is illusion. She loved him once from her wounds. Now she loves herself from her wisdom. What he perceives as detachment is simply alignment. She has aligned with her worth, her boundaries, her truth. This alignment radiates a quiet authority that no words could express. He feels it in her absence, in the way her silence fills the room like a presence larger than herself. In truth, her stillness is mercy. It gives him the chance to meet himself, to question his patterns, to face the discomfort he's avoided through power and control. But mercy feels cruel to those who fear their own reflection. So he calls her distant. He convinces himself she's heartless. He paints her as cold to justify the pain of losing her warmth. Yet deep down, something in him knows, she didn't leave to hurt him, she left to heal herself. Her journey through silence mirrors the process of individuation, the Jungian path of integrating one's unconscious into wholeness. She is no longer split between the woman she was taught to be and the woman she truly is. The external man becomes a symbol of her inner work, the projection she withdraws to reclaim her own power. When she takes her energy back, she's not just leaving him, she's leaving behind the version of herself that needed his approval to feel alive. This is why her stillness burns. Because it's not rejection, it's evolution. It reminds him of what he could be if he stopped running from himself. And in the quiet of her absence, he begins to realize that her silence is not punishment, but prophecy. It whispers to him that love cannot survive without consciousness, that affection without growth turns to decay. Still, most men will not hear the message until it's too late. They will chase new voices, new faces, new noise, but the echo of her stillness will follow them. Because once a man has been in the presence of a woman who knows her peace, every chaotic connection afterward feels counterfeit. She no longer worries about being understood, and that is what makes her most dangerous. Not her words, but their absence. Each glance that once sought permission now affirms her sovereignty. Her presence is measured, deliberate, and luminous, yet untouchable. To the man who once relied on her for emotional validation, this becomes an invisible force field he cannot breach. It is the quiet authority of a woman who has tasted the fullness of herself and refuses to dilute it to accommodate someone else's insecurities. Every step she takes in this stillness is a reclamation of her body, mind, and spirit, a realignment of her energy to the rhythm of her own soul rather than the erratic tides of another's ego. Her stillness is not emptiness. It is charged, alive, magnetic in a way that words could never be. It calls to the deepest parts of the masculine unconscious, the places he has long ignored or repressed. When a man feels unsettled by a woman's quiet, he is not unsettled by her, he is unsettled by himself. Her calm forces him to sit with the parts of his psyche he has tried to avoid, the fears, insecurities, and desires he projected onto her for convenience. He may try to fill the silence with noise, distraction, or manipulation, but her stillness persists. It is a mirror to his soul, reflecting every corner of darkness he refuses to illuminate. This is the paradox of feminine power. She does not chase, yet her absence becomes irresistible. She does not provoke, yet her calm becomes unbearable. Men often mistake this as cruelty because it contradicts the rules they understand, the rules of pursuit, dominance, and reaction. They are unprepared for a presence that holds itself with quiet confidence and refuses to validate their worth. Her stillness is a force of nature, a psychological gravity that attracts through absence, not presence. It is both liberation and revelation. For her, a return to self, and for him, a confrontation with what he has neglected. From a Jungian perspective, what unfolds is not simply a romantic or emotional dynamic, but an archetypal encounter between the conscious and unconscious mind. She embodies the awakened feminine, fully integrated and self-contained, while he faces the animus within, the unrefined masculine aspects shaped by ego, projection, and unresolved trauma. Her stillness triggers the alchemy of self-examination, compelling him to reckon with shadows he once projected outward. What he calls punishment is, in essence, the reflection of his own resistance to growth, the echo of the parts of himself he refuses to acknowledge. For her, this is the ultimate act of self-respect. She no longer negotiates her energy to suit his comfort or inflate his ego. She does not rationalize his reactions or soften her truth to prevent conflict. Her silence communicates boundaries stronger than any argument, clearer than any plea. She understands that love is not measured by reaction, and respect is not granted by neediness. In withdrawing, she demonstrates mastery over her own psyche and the courage to embody it fully. Her stillness is not about proving a point. It is about reclaiming what has always been hers: autonomy, dignity, and presence. And yet, there is an intimacy in her stillness that he cannot resist. The spaces between her words become charged with meaning. Her absence forces him to project, to introspect, to feel what he never allowed himself to feel in the chaos of her prior attentions. Every imagined glance, every replayed memory becomes a confrontation with his own incompleteness. He begins to see that her energy was never merely about him. It was a reflection of her wholeness, and by withdrawing it, she illuminates the emptiness he attempted to fill with projection. You may notice that she doesn't linger in judgment. She doesn't orchestrate her absence as punishment. It unfolds naturally from self-possession. Her stillness is the product of inner work, the integration of pain, the mastery over her reactions, the conscious choice to no longer give herself away to what diminishes her. This is the feminine energy of discernment, the kind of presence that commands attention not through drama, but through authenticity. The deeper he tries to reclaim her attention, the more he encounters the wall of her integrity, the unshakable calm of a soul that refuses to be dictated by external approval. Her silence becomes the most eloquent language he has ever known. It speaks to the deepest recesses of his mind, to the parts that crave meaning, to the wounds that lie beneath bravado. It exposes the truth he cannot hide from, that the chaos of desire cannot substitute for self-awareness, that affection cannot mask unresolved shadow work, and that control is a poor replacement for growth. In trying to provoke her reaction, he encounters only the strength of her detachment, the unwavering alignment of her will with her inner truth. In the alchemy of this dynamic, she emerges transformed. Her stillness is not a void, it is the radiance of her reclamation. Every pause, every quiet glance, every unspoken boundary carries the weight of her awakening. She is no longer defined by his need, no longer tethered to his ego, and no longer vulnerable to the turbulence of his insecurities. She has become the embodiment of the feminine principle in its most profound form, sovereign, self-contained, and unapologetically aligned with her own truth. He begins to understand, too late perhaps, that her stillness was never about him. It was about the reclamation of herself, the sacred realignment of her energy, the quiet ceremony of self-respect that no argument, no plea, no manipulation could interrupt. Each unspoken word, each unoffered explanation, each measured pause is a testament to her mastery over herself, a force that cannot be bribed or coerced. He feels the absence like gravity, pulling at the core of his unresolved ego, forcing him into confrontation with the parts of himself he has long ignored. And in that confrontation, the truth becomes undeniable: she is whole, and he is not. Her stillness is a crucible in which both their realities are tested. She has left behind the woman who adjusted, accommodated, and smoothed over every rough edge of his temperament. She now stands as a beacon of conscious choice, a living embodiment of boundaries fused with desire. She understands that love, when freely given, requires discernment, that energy poured into what diminishes her is energy stolen from her own evolution. Every quiet moment she allows herself is a conscious reclamation, a restoration of power long scattered to the winds of his expectations. He chases, yet finds nothing. Every attempt to provoke a response is met with measured calm, a reflection of her inner peace. What he perceives as punishment is not punishment at all. It is consequence, the natural unfolding of a woman who has seen through the illusion of dependence and demanded alignment, not reaction. In the echo of her silence, he faces the specters of his own making, the unresolved anger, the insecurities, the ego-driven desire to control. He begins to realize that she does not need to justify, explain, or soften herself for him to remain present. She simply exists, complete, sovereign, unshaken. This is the alchemy of feminine power, the ability to hold oneself fully without yielding to external demand. Her stillness becomes a teacher, though he may not wish to learn. She demonstrates, without aggression or argument, that true influence arises from alignment with self, not compliance to another's ego. She no longer validates his existence. She mirrors her own. In doing so, she awakens in him the first stirrings of self-reflection, the painful yet necessary confrontation with the inner void he has long ignored. And she is free. Freed from the compulsion to explain, to negotiate, to perform, she moves through life with a rhythm dictated only by her own inner compass. Her heart is no longer hostage to reaction. Her mind is no longer a playground for ego. She has integrated her shadows, nurtured her desires, and disciplined her energy. The stillness she embodies is not loneliness, it is sanctuary. Each breath she takes resonates with the authority of a woman who knows her value and no longer allows it to be defined by the oscillations of another's need. You can feel the subtle magnetism of her presence even in absence. She commands attention not through chaos but through clarity. He senses it, though he cannot reach it. Every attempt to reclaim what is no longer offered only illuminates the chasm between dependency and sovereignty. And here lies the ultimate lesson. The power she wields is not in what she gives, but in what she retains. It is the mastery of self over reaction, of peace over pleading, of being over appearing. In her stillness, the cycle completes. She has left behind the version of herself that defined worth through his gaze. He has been confronted with his own shadow, his own illusions, and perhaps, if he chooses, the seeds of his own growth. She walks forward, unbound, unchained, luminous in her autonomy. The world may not understand her silence, but she understands it fully. It is the language of her freedom, the articulation of her rebirth, the sound of a soul finally at peace with itself. And in that peace, there is no need for reaction, no desire to prove, no energy wasted on the unworthy. Her stillness has become the ultimate expression of feminine power, unassailable, unshakable, unbound. It is a quiet victory, a testament to the wisdom of boundaries, the strength of discernment, and the profound necessity of loving oneself first. The man may chase, may plead, may regret, but she moves forward, aligned with the truth of her soul. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.